Disclaimer. Disclaimer, this definitely isn't a disclaimer if you ask me. Disclaimer, this definitely isn't. I can't talk. This is so hard.
One eternity later.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I am a 4th year medical student. I recently took Step 1. Well, not super recently, but I took Step 1 in the beginning of this year. And in this video, I would like to talk about how I study for Step 1. The key to Step 1 studying, I think, is to create a thoughtful schedule beforehand, a schedule that you can realistically follow. And before I got started on the process, I definitely relied heavily on what other people had to offer on platforms such as YouTube, SDN, as well as Reddit. So I hope what I talk about today, just by sharing about my experience, I hope that's helpful to you too. And I'm going to cover 4 major areas in this video. So first I'm going to briefly talk about what Step 1 is about, what kind of exam it is, and then 2, I'm going to talk about the study resources that I used, and 3, talk about how I planned out my overall study schedule, and 4, just a little bit about the NBME official practice exams. Alright, so let's talk about what Step 1 exam is. Step 1 exam is one of the first board exams you take to become a licensed physician in the United States. It's named Step 1, and then after it you have Step 2, which most people take toward the end of medical school, and then Step 3, which a lot of people take during residency, typically intern year. So Step 1 itself, in terms of the timing of it, some schools recommend students to take it before clinical year, whereas other schools recommend students to take it after they finish rotations in clinical year. So that really depends on your school. And then the exam itself, it really is a long marathon. Step 1 exam is 8 hours long. You have 7 blocks of questions. For each block, you're given 60 minutes and typically about 40 questions or so. The exam really does last the entire day. So when we talk about how to prep for the exam, just getting yourself ready and practicing endurance is a part of that preparation. Step 1 is a really big and important exam, and it's also an exam that's undergoing a lot of changes. I believe starting from the beginning of 2022, Step 1 exam is going to be pass or fail. A lot of people have shared their thoughts and opinions about this change on YouTube, so today I'm going to refrain from talking about that and just mostly focus on how I study for Step 1 while it is still not pass or fail, so you still get a numerical score for it. Alright, so let's talk about study resources. There's so many study resources out there that it can be really overwhelming for you to decide which ones are the right ones for you. And I think how many study resources you end up using also depends on how long and how much time you give yourself during dedicated. Most people that I know who took Step 1 did it in 4 to 8 weeks, and I myself took 5.5 weeks to study during dedicated. And so definitely keep that in mind when I talk about my study resources. So I ended up using UFAP, Sketchy, Boards and Beyond, as well as Goljian Lectures as my resources. I like to think about my resources in 2 different categories: the core resources, which I use every single day, and those are UFAP and Sketchy. And then there are the supplementary resources that I use to supplement whenever I had time. So those are the Goljian Lectures as well as Boards and Beyond. For the core resources, UFAP is pretty famous. That's why it's an acronym. It stands for UWorld, First Aid, and Pathoma. And I think most students who take Step 1 will argue that these are the must-haves that pretty much everybody uses. So UWorld is a question bank with 2,000 questions or so. The questions are really well written and the answer explanations are really detailed. And I myself really enjoy going through that question bank, and I learned a lot from doing those questions and from reading the answer explanations. First Aid is actually quite an interesting experience for me. I still have the book here with me, and you can see it's a really thick and big book. Actually gets bigger and bigger every year when they update it. Mine is from 2018. I was actually getting a little frustrated when I was going through First Aid. I went in kind of thinking I would be able to learn from going through First Aid, but it turned out First Aid is more of a book of outlines, and it is a great book for reviews, but if you are unfamiliar with some of the subjects, I will recommend you to supplement it with one of the resources I'm going to talk about later on. And then Pathoma is, right, I have it right here. As you can see, it is much smaller than first aid. Pathology for me was not a subject that came easily. There are a lot of details to remember. Pathoma made pathology just so much more interesting to learn. The book includes information that's detailed enough for you to answer questions on the exam, but not super detailed that it starts to get boring. Alright, so now let's talk about Sketchy. I used both Sketchy Microbiology and Sketchy Pharmacology. I think Sketchy is absolutely an incredible resource. Microbiology and pharmacology are fields that include a lot of details that are kind of difficult to remember. For me, at least, I could never remember which organisms are gram-stain positive versus negative, and which organisms are oxidase positive versus negative. And Sketchy really made it not only possible for me to remember all those details in order to answer questions in the exam, but they actually made it really fun. When I made time in the schedule for myself to watch Sketchy videos, those would be the times that I actually looked forward to during the day. Alright, so now let's talk about the supplementary resources. I used Boards and Beyond as well as Goljian Lectures. Not sure if that's how you pronounce his name, but let's start with Boards and Beyond. A lot of videos on Boards and Beyond, and they do it in a lecture format where they actually take you through the slides and go over information in great detail. I think it is an amazing resource, but at the same time, it takes a lot of time for you to go over all the videos. For me, because I took it in 5.5 weeks, I didn't find myself to have enough time to actually sit down and watch every single video. So what I did was I supplemented and used Boards and Beyond videos for first aid immunology chapter as well as first aid microbiology chapter, because those two chapters were especially dense and difficult for me to remember. I think if you have more time during dedicated, or if you've started using this resource during preclinical year or clinical year, then I think it's a really good one to stick with. Alright, so Goljian Lectures. I listened to Goljian Lectures at 2 times speed whenever I was walking outside or when I was working out in the gym. More of a resource to make myself feel like I was being productive. Whether or not it was actually super helpful to me, I don't know. But if you put more time into the resource, I think it could be a very good one for you. So I had 2 different versions of my study schedule. One was a big overview schedule and the other one is a detailed daily schedule. For my big overview schedule, that was there for me to write out my bigger goals for every single week. Things like when I wanted to take the NBME practice exams, when I wanted to finish going over first aid and Pathoma, things like that. And there were 2 things that I did that looking back I think was really helpful. So number 1 was that I tried to customize my big overview schedule based on my own strengths and weaknesses. So I looked over my learner's profile from preclinical years, and if you have one, I would recommend you to do the same. So for me, I found that I did better in cardiology and I didn't do so well in nephrology. So when I was going through first aid, I made sure to spend more time on nephrology. The second thing that I found to be super helpful was to plan in catch-up days. No matter how hard I tried to stick to the schedule, I still fell behind pretty much every single week. And just having that catch-up day in the schedule gave myself a little bit of breathing room to tell myself, you know what, it's okay that you're a little bit behind, but you have room to catch up. Alright, so for the daily schedule, I made sure to write out the little tasks that I wanted to accomplish the next day, and I would do them before I go to bed every single night. And it made it really easy for me to get up in the morning, because when I woke up in the morning, I didn't really have to think about what to do for that day. I already had a to-do list, and all I needed to do was to get out of bed, get ready, and go to the library. There are NBME practice exams, which are the official practice exams that you can purchase and use. They're quite expensive. I don't remember how much they were, but I think each one cost about $60 to $70 each. Even though they cost that much, I still want to say that they're worth doing for a few reasons. One is for self-assessment. If in the beginning of your dedicated study time you would like to know where you stand on the spectrum of things, doing an NBME practice exam will be helpful. And then reason number 2 is that I found those exams they look very similar to the actual Step 1 exam. So they can help you get used to the NBME style of writing questions and how they lay everything out on the computer screen. And reason number 3 is that these exams they're not the full exam, so they don't take 8 hours. But each practice exam, if I remember correctly, was 4 hours long. And it is a good practice of endurance. You have to remember that the actual Step 1 exam is 8 hours long, and you do kind of need to get yourself prepared for that. And I think the NBME practice exams are worth purchasing for that reason as well. One thing that I would recommend when you end up doing those exams is that you've already paid the money, you've already put the money down, might as well take them very seriously. So what I did was I took all of them in the library, I turned my phone off, put my phone away, and treated them like the real thing. And I think that was really helpful in getting myself prepared for the actual exam day. So today we talked about what Step 1 exam is, the study resources I used, how I plan out my study schedule using a big overview schedule as well as a daily schedule, and last but not least, the NBME practice exams. And disclaimer, people have different studying styles, so the resources that I use and the way that I study may not be the best one for you, but I hope what I share today can be helpful when you try to find your way of preparing for this exam. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it to be helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.